Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, this is Battlefield 1. In today's weapon showdown, we're going to be looking at the two best medium-range SLRs for the medic class in Battlefield 1. Specifically, of course, I'm talking about the Autoloading A35 and the recently buffed RSC 1917. We're going to be looking at the respective most popular variants of each of these weapons. So for the Autoloading A35, this means looking at the Marksman, and in the case of the RSC, we speak, of course, of the factory variant. Now, these weapons always have been two weapons very interesting to compare to one another, because while they share a number of very close similarities, one could argue they are now in some senses identical. They are at the same time in many ways, in many stat departments, as far as apart two SLRs really can be within the confines of Battlefield 1, meaning that these weapons may be similar in many senses, but in others very much are two distinct weapons. Not only that, but thanks to the time to kill patch, these weapons now perform differently, at least have to perform differently in a different environment, and in the case of the RSC, have received more or less a quite substantial buff to their power, making it all the more difficult now to really decide which of these two weapons is the better of the two to use. Well, at least on paper that is, because the community as a whole, at least if you look at usage statistics, seems to clearly favor the RSC 1917 factory over the Marksman version of the Autoloading, those two being the most frequently used variants of those respective weapons. At least this is the case since the time to kill patch came out on the 30th of January. Before that, those two weapons were more or less equally balanced in the amount of usage they saw. Post time to kill patch, you're now looking at easily 6% of all SLR kills going to the RSC in either the factory or optical version, whereas the Autoloading trails at only 3.8% with its factory version and Marksman version respectively. But before we get too much into the very nuanced sometimes and very clear differences between these two weapons, let's briefly go over the stats to get a quick picture on each respective weapon. Starting with the Autoloading A35, it comes in with a 42 maximum damage, minimum damage of 30, giving you a 3-shot kill all the way out to 70 meters, and at that distance, a time to kill between 337 milliseconds and 440. This comes with a fire rate of 359 rounds per minute, a muzzle velocity of 660 milliseconds, relatively slow, definitely not the slowest. A very limited magazine size, of course, only 5. Reload times that, well, are not the rosiest of all reload times, with a single bullet taking you 2.2 seconds. Each additional bullet will take you 0.5 seconds. If you reload a full strip clip, that is 5 bullets, you're looking at a 3.2 second reload in the case of this weapon. Recoil, at least post-patch, is relatively moderate, but nevertheless noticeable given the very high fire rate of this weapon, with vertical of 0.85 and horizontal to the left and right at 0.15. Spread values are, well, relatively what you would expect. The Marksman variant of this weapon comes in with a base ADS, that's while aiming down sight and not moving, of 0.12, a moving ADS of 0.82, and hipfire, not the worst for SLRs, but certainly still not very reliable, at 2.5 while hipfiring standing and moving. The last stat of importance here to mention is the maximum fire rate at minimum spread, that is the maximum fire rate at which you can fire this weapon while maintaining its most accurate state. This, of course, thanks to the time to kill shift, has changed quite dramatically, and the case of this weapon means now that you can comfortably fire the Autoloading A35 at 327 rounds per minute without compromising on accuracy when doing so. The RSC, of course, is a very different boat altogether. It comes with a maximum damage of 53, a minimum damage of 38, giving you a time to kill between 338 and 432. That is at its 2-shot kill between, of course, 0 and 70 meters. It comes with a much slower fire rate given its 2-shot kill at 179 rounds per minute, a slightly faster muzzle velocity than that of the Autoloadings at 720 meters per second, more shots to shoot through at 6, especially considering that you can 2-shot most of your targets in the body, and similar reload times with a short reload slightly longer at 2.7 seconds, but a long reload at 3.3. Recoil is relatively high compared to the Autoloading with this weapon, but you must take into account that this weapon fires at a much slower fire rate, with a vertical of 1.5 and a horizontal to the left and right, that is, of 0.9. Accuracy values are similar but not identical, with an ADS value, that's while aiming down sight and not moving, of 0.15, ADS while moving at 1.05, and hipfire while standing and moving simultaneously at 3. When it comes to the maximum fire rate while maintaining minimum spread, this weapon is capable of firing at around about about 170, 171 rounds per minute without compromising on accuracy whatsoever. Very, very close to its actual maximum fire rate. That, of course, already, however, being relatively low to begin with. Stats then out of the way, let's start talking really about some of the differences. And I think the best place to start here is really where the RSC previous to this update was. The Autoloading had the faster time to kill previous to this update, was the ultimate one-on-one machine, capable of dishing out close quarter damage comparable or better, with a perfect accuracy that is, than most SMGs. Situations have of course changed since. The Autoloading no longer possesses that close quarter dominance. For a matter of fact, it is not to be used under 12 meters anymore, where SMGs will clearly out damage it more or less no matter what fire rate they possess. At medium range, of course, things are unchanged for the Autoloading. It basically simply got a spread buff, making it easier to use, more accurate at a higher fire rate without kind of its spread getting out of control. So far, so good. The RSC previously, of course, had the advantage of, well, slightly slower time to kill, slightly worse performance in close quarters, however, a larger magazine, more forgiving with missing shots, and at medium range, definitely the potential to comfortably take out 2 targets. That really hasn't changed, only that its damage, that of the RSC, has been substantially increased. Well, rather its fire rate has been increased, allowing it to get a time to kill identical to the Autoloading A35, but for 1 or 2 milliseconds. Not something that is in any way, shape or form actually noticeable when using the weapons. So the Autoloading's advantage of being able to perform so very well in close quarters and having a slightly higher time to kill over the RSC, however, at the cost, of course, of only being able to take out 1 target per magazine, very much is gone. No more, at least compared to this weapon, and no more against SMGs in close quarter. That's not to say that the weapon doesn't still have its advantages. In favor of the Autoloading as it is now is, of course, if you miss a shot at 359 rounds per minute, it's not going to cost your TTK too much to get that 4th shot in. The same cannot be said for the RSC in a clutch one-on-one situation. If you miss your shot, you're adding 50% to your time to kill. If you're missing 2 shots, you're doubling your time to kill. And things really start to look very bad time to kill wise when you need 3 or 4 shots. And as somebody who tends to miss quite a few shots with the RSC, I speak of experience in this specific circumstance. So the Autoloading is still able to maintain that ultimate one-on-one king. The problem with this is that at the ranges at which it is now intended, that's not as relevant as previous. With its previous close quarter option, the weapon was not only extremely flexible, but was able to make use of the more one-on-one situation, in my opinion, more frequently. Now, obviously, it's safer to use this weapon at a more medium range than previous, and both of these weapons have seen their minimum shot kills improved, of course, from 47 meters max previously now to 70. That doesn't change the fact that the Autoloading is losing one of its key components, and the RSC, if anything, is just really getting better at what it previously was. And for me personally, the RSC has always been the slightly better medium range weapon. And let me explain why specifically. At medium range, with the player movement, it's quite easy to miss a shot, no matter how accurate you are. On the other hand, at that medium range, especially if you position yourself with cover, your raw possible time to kill, or the fact that you miss a shot and it massively increases your time to kill, becomes less relevant because you're not necessarily directly under threat, at least if you've positioned yourself well. You've not got an enemy standing right in front of you who is going to kill you in the blink of an eye if you don't take him out first. Thus, missing that shot from time to time and having those extra shots that the RSC does is very much beneficial. Furthermore, the slower fire rate that you are forced to use with the RSC allows you more time to essentially reacquire or continuously acquire a moving target. In essence, it gives you more time to aim, whereas the Autoloading is very much less forgiving there. If you want a similar time to kill to the RSC, not only do you have to be way more accurate than you do with the RSC if you don't want to have to reload between firing at a target, you have to maintain 60% accuracy versus only 33 with the RS3, at least technically from a magazine standpoint, but also with the Autoloading, you have to fire much more quickly, meaning that if your target is very fond of moving a lot, be that AD-ADing, be that just running or jumping, then your job is going to be a lot harder. and you're going to have to slow down your fire rate substantially if you want to hit your shots, giving the advantage really to the RSC. Now that's not where things end. There is some redeeming qualities of the autoloading 835. Outside of the 12-meter range at which SMGs perform their 4-shot kill, and the same of course goes for LMGs, the autoloading, in my opinion, is of course still the better weapon in the one-on-one scenario. It is ultimately because of the fact that you can miss a shot and still comfortably have a very low time to kill, the better weapon for that specific scenario. It's simply the fact that these situations happen less frequently. Now, you can also make an argument for the autoloading on a headshot basis, whereas the RSC gains no advantage out of headshotting its target unless they are already damaged. You cannot get a one-shot kill with the RSC when headshotting somebody. It doesn't do 100 damage, thus you cannot improve your time to kill in that way. The autoloading, on the other hand, will become a 2-shot kill if you headshot somebody and then, for example, body shot them. The only problem with this is once more down to the engagement distances that we're talking about. In close quarter, this is very much, in my opinion, unviable to do. You can debate. Ultimately, however, the autoloading is no longer ideal for close quarter, so it's unimportant anyway. At the medium-long range, hitting headshots is really difficult with a weapon such as the autoloading. At least in my opinion, I find targets to move around too much, and I'm going to have to sacrifice, essentially, fire rate quite substantially to place my shots that accurate to the point where I'm not really getting any benefit out of it anymore. Thus, headshots, in my opinion, while it is an argument for the autoloading 835, are not enough of a redeeming factor and more of a lucky occurrence for time to time in my personal experience. So does that mean that the RSC is now the ultimate medic medium range skill cannon? Well, ultimately I think this is very much a question of your personal preference and playstyle. I still enjoy the autoloading very much as I did previous to this update, or almost as much as I did previous to this update, and it will remain my most used SLR. But the usage statistics on how many kills have been gotten with what SLR are quite telling on what generally the community prefers of these two weapons. It is the RSC, and understandably so. It's better suited for the now clearly defined medium range medic that DICE has put into force thanks to the time to kill shift. The autoloading is arguably still the better one-on-one, but it can't perform as well in practice, in reality, at medium range. And this has been pointed out by, I think, many a person who have looked at these weapons in detail. The RSC, arguably, is now the better pick of the two. At least that's my opinion, or the opinion I form on the basis of both my personal experience, the usage statistics available from Battlefield Tracker, and of course, the weapon statistics that you can get from Simthic.com. With that, however, I'd really like to ask you guys what you think of this comparison, what you guys think of these two weapons, specifically if you actually use one or both of these weapons now or in the past. So leave that, as well as, of course, your usual video suggestions down below in the comments, or hit me up with them on Twitter. If you enjoyed this video, found it helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 1 video.